Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's video, we're talking about passwords and password security, certainly a subject that is at the very heart of cybersecurity today, and it's also a subject that offers plenty of challenges and pitfalls. To provide guidance, I'm joined by a major industry expert. With me is Anna Pobletts, Engineering Director at 1Password. Anna, very good to have you with us today.
Thanks, James. I'm excited to be here.
So I want to talk about Passkey technology. I've got some great questions, but before we get to that, I think it'd be interesting to talk about your career. You've had an interesting career. You've played a founding role, and talk about that a little bit, if you would.
Yeah, I'd love to. So my background is mostly in security, especially product security, application security, identity, things like that. And so I've worked in a number of different roles around that, but I think one that was really impactful was working in consulting or like pen testing, where you kind of find security vulnerabilities, you tell your clients about them and help them fix it. And really often we would report issues around passwords, right? That's super common in applications and websites. So we would tell them, you need longer passwords, or you need MFA, or you need people make people log in more frequently, things like that. And honestly, usually they would just say no. Like, we're not going to change that. We accept that risk. And the reason for that is because it affects their bottom line. Like, if you think especially about like e-commerce companies or something like that, it's pretty bad for business if you're making people like struggle to log in. And
Right.
so this was something that my co-founder Cole and I talked about all the time. It's kind of frustrating, but there also was never really a better option than just suggesting longer passwords or MFA. So we were tracking a lot of new technology coming out in this space, in particular something called WebAuthn, which is the underlying protocol behind passkeys. And
Mhm.
we realized that this could be an opportunity to actually like solve the password problem in a way that didn't hurt a business, right? It could actually help them with conversions or reduce friction rather than just adding more layers on top. And so we started Passage to do exactly that, to help businesses do that. And then about a year and a half ago, Passage was acquired by 1Password. And we've continued to kind of do the same mission just as part of 1Password now.
That's great. Or so you've been a business founder and a business owner. I would imagine that there have been some, we're going to get too deep into this, but I think it's interesting. You probably had some challenges just in terms of, growing the business and all the things that go into that.
Certainly, it was my first time as a founder, and I learned so much in a very short amount of time.
Uh-huh.
It was a really special experience for sure.
That's great. All right, let's talk about passkey technology. What exactly is passkey technology, and what's wrong with simply using good old-fashioned passwords?
Hopefully, you'll quickly learn a lot of things are wrong with passwords. I'm sure everyone knows. No one really likes them, but I
Right.
think it's just what people are used to, right? And so I think that is a big burden here. So passkeys are essentially a new way to log into apps and websites that's passwordless. So it's meant to be more secure and more user-friendly than passwords. When you What it looks and feels like to users is really something like your Touch ID, your Face ID, whatever biometric is already built into your device. That's what it's going to feel like when you use a passkey to log in, which is great. That's really easy. That's something we're all familiar with. Behind the scenes, it's using public key cryptography, which has been around for a really long time. It's the basis for a lot of other technologies like SSH and things like that.
Mhm.
And so when a user creates an account on a website, we're going to create a unique key pair and the public key is sent to the website and the private key stays on the user's device. So the private key never leaves the user's device, and it can be used to like cryptographically sign challenges that the website can then verify. The important thing here is that that private key is totally random, securely generated, and stays on your device, and the website only has the public key. So before I go into some security benefits, I do want to touch on your sort of like, why not passwords, right? Like,
Sure,
why don't we
sure.
just make them better?
People are
And
wondering, right?
exactly. And I think we all like don't love passwords, but there's no better alternative really until now. And so I think the best way I can frame it is that it really comes down to passwords putting all of the burden on the user to be secure, right? It is on you as a user to think up a good password, remember a good password, not fall for a phishing attack, things along those lines. The goal with passkeys is to remove that human error from logging in, right? We're going to build the security directly into the technology. We're going to make it really easy, make it something you can't mess up, right? Like, people are busy, they're
Mhm.
tired. You just shouldn't have to think about logging into a website that hard. And so that is really the motivation behind passkeys.
All right, I
The
hear you.
only other, oh,
Go
sorry, go
ahead,
ahead.
please. Oh, I was going to say that
Um,
you used the word biometric at one point, and
Yeah.
so you're saying at the root of this is a biometric approach.
Yeah. So interestingly, like it looks and feels like a biometric to a user, but there's actually none of your biometric data is getting sent to a website or anything like that. And I think that's really important to know from a privacy perspective in particular. What
Mhm.
you're doing is you're using the biometrics that are built into your device to essentially unlock access to your private key that is stored securely on, say, your iPhone or something like that, right? And so you're getting all the benefits of biometrics, which is that it's really easy, but you're not like really concerned about the privacy or like security aspects where someone's going to like chop your finger off to use it on something, right? Like that
Mhm.
doesn't become quite as relevant. And so from a security perspective, we're saying, okay, there's no secret stored on the website anymore that could be stolen. We have these huge data breaches with just like millions of credentials. That attack doesn't really exist here. Passkeys are resistant to phishing attacks, which is another huge
Mm.
swath of really common, easy to execute attacks.
Mhm.
And lastly, to anything that's like a credential based attack. So brute forcing, credential stuffing, things like that. Passkeys are resistant to all of those. And so, yes, there will be attacks against passkeys that come out. Nothing is going to be totally infallible, but you're raising the bar so much from this baseline of really easy to execute across a network style of attacks that exist now against passwords.
Mhm. All right, so some real advantages. What are the challenges with Passkey? It seems like with all those advantages, they should be everywhere. Why aren't they everywhere then?
I'm hoping they will be soon. But I think it's reasonable that there's a lot of inertia moving away from passwords, right? Like authentication, especially for consumers, probably hasn't meaningfully changed in like the last 50 years, right? And so people don't really like passwords, but they know them and they understand them and they know exactly how to register for a new website when they see one. So I think there's two sides of the challenge. One is for consumers. Passkeys are new. It doesn't necessarily have consistent support or interfaces across different platforms and different websites. If you were to go use a password on a couple different websites, maybe across different platforms, even like on an Android and an iPhone, you're probably going to have a kind of different experience. Like you may not even recognize that you're using the same technology in some cases. And
Hmm.
so the flip side of that challenge is for businesses. Like it's just hard to implement, not just from uh, like an API perspective, because all these platforms are a little bit different, but also from a user flow perspective. How do you communicate to users? How do you tell them this is a passkey and like, here's your fallback method and here's how to do it across different devices? There's a lot of complexity there. And that leads to these inconsistent implementations that then kind of confuse users. And so from both sides, we just need to give people like a one clear, consistent experience that they can understand is the same technology across all of these different websites.
Well, does that mean there are inconsistent experiences because they're different providers? And what is causing that lack of uniformity?
I think some of it is like guidance for websites and businesses on the best ways to guide a user through this experience, right? Like it's not even always like a strictly code thing. It's even just like a UI or a design of how am I communicating with my users? What do I do if they don't have a passkey? Then what, right? Like how are we handling all of these edge cases? And I
Mhm.
think that can lead to a almost sometimes worse user experience if it's not done well.
You mentioned some of the issues are with the users. Do you think the complexity might be like they need to be educated on that issue?
For sure. I think like 1Password as an example can play a pretty big role in that, as can the major platforms because they just have these huge audiences and you can store your passkeys, in your Google account or your iCloud account or your 1Password account, for example. And so I think everyone plays a role in educating their user base, building trust with their user base as people who can, as companies who can hold the passkeys. And then there's sort of the website side of, if you're like your Google account or your Amazon account, like can educate you on how to set up a passkey on their particular site. And so it'll have to be a little bit of awareness and education from all these different parties working together. Because if people want passkeys, but websites don't implement them, we're never really going to get anywhere. And the same is true in the other direction. If every website in the world adds passkeys to their website, but people don't have good ways to use them through Google and Apple and 1Password, then we're never really going to get anywhere, right?
Mhm. I get it. All right, so let's talk about Passage, which we know is owned by 1Password. I mean, how does it help customers with their security efforts?
Yeah. So Passage is a product by 1Password that's aimed at solving the business side of these challenges I've been talking about. It's a tool that makes it really easy for businesses to add passkeys to their websites, like with the goal mostly of reducing friction at sign in, increasing conversions, things like that. I think the best way to think about it is kind of like Stripe for passkeys.
Hmm.
So there's two different versions. The first is called Passage Complete. This is a complete authentication and user management platform that's fully passwordless. So we'll manage your users, we'll prioritize passkey logins, but we'll also support other forms of login like social login or magic links. If your users say like aren't really ready for passkeys yet or you need account recovery, this is a really easy form of Passage to implement. It's literally like 2 lines of code in your front end, and we handle all of the user flows, all of the communication with your users, all the edge cases.
Hmm.
The other is Passage Flex. A really big trend that I've seen with early adopters, especially, is that they're not really going all in on passkeys. They'll add passkeys as an option for users to log in, but they'll still keep their passwords.
Hmm.
And so these apps don't really get the security benefits of passkeys because there's still a password behind the scenes, but it allows them to like slowly introduce a new technology and you still get some of the user experience benefits of passkeys while like introducing your users to it. So that's great, but it can be kind of challenging still. And so Flex is our answer to that. It's more of an like SDK based tool that lets developers add passkeys on top of what you already have. You keep your session management, your user models, all that stuff, and you just add passkeys on top.
So really, a user with a password or using the passkey technology could get into the site. So it's more flexible in that sense.
Exactly. And so if you think about like Amazon, Home Depot, eBay, all these sites that have passkey support, for the most part, they all every user on that platform still has a password behind the scenes. And so those companies, if they say like, I want to add an option for passkeys, they don't want to like totally overhaul their entire authentication to make that happen. Authentication's so complicated. They just want to be able to like add a button that says like, if you want to use passkeys instead of a password, you can. And so Flex helps us give people that capability, but without them having to like change all their underlying like authentication infrastructure.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's look to the future of password security. I mean, what do you see in the months and/or years ahead, and how can companies get ready for that now?
Yeah, I would love to say like, 5 to 10 years from now, there won't be any passwords. I don't know if that's totally true. I think
Hmm.
there may always be some passwords, but I would hope that it's a lot less, especially in the consumer application space, that there is just so much unbelievable benefit to using something like passkeys. And so, this is really the first time we've ever had this trade-off between like security and user experience where it's actually better for both. And so I really think we will see like very widespread adoption of passkeys, and particularly for consumers. In general, my philosophy is that passkeys are great for solving an individual problem, and that's kind of where we are now. But we need to solve that problem at scale for it to really become a thing, right? Like they're great for users, they're easy, they're secure, but that doesn't really matter unless websites can actually support passkeys and they can do it well and they can do it with confidence. And so I think that really comes down to developers. I think we know how effective developers are at getting new technology adopted by companies.
Mhm.
And so I think the future of passkeys will rely on, can we partner with developers? Can we support them well? Can we help them bridge this gap? And so for me, I think developers are really at the center of it.
It does make a lot of sense. I mean, developers are amazing in terms of their influence in the community. Really, they can move things forward.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And we've always felt that way. Like at Passage, it's been like, this is a developer tool. Like, yes, it serves businesses, but if it's not easy to use, what's the point, right?
Hmm. Seems like maybe one of the things getting in the way of passkey adoption in the years ahead, hard to say, is there might be users out there that say, "Oh heck, I've got to log into my bank account. I know my password. I don't want some system somewhere to like know my password. I'm the only one who's going to know the password." So it's almost like an anxiety issue, I would think, for some of the users. You run into that?
I think that's definitely where the awareness comes in, right? Like we talked about biometrics earlier. I think people may do a biometric and assume that that data is like your fingerprint data or something is getting sent to a website, even though that's not what's happening, right? And so I think there's a lot of awareness and education that platforms can do in particular to just help people get comfortable with the technology. I think once you do it once, you're like, whoa, that was awesome. I want to do that everywhere. But how do we get people that first exposure and that first experience so they can have that kind of aha moment?
Yeah, it makes sense it'll happen because I remember it was a long time ago. People did not want to use their credit card on the internet. Like, oh, I wouldn't enter my credit card there. But of course, what happened to that feeling? That's pretty well disappeared. So it makes sense that passkeys would evolve over time.
I think so. And I think especially if the industry can make it easy for people and kind of keep educating them, I think we can get there, and we can get there fast because the benefits are very real.
Anything else you'd like to add about passage or passkey technology?
No, this has been great. We covered so much in such a short amount of time. It was really great chatting.
And a great thank you, and come back and talk with us again sometime.
I'd love to.